Hello and welcome to the Prime Reckoning. I'm Julie and this is a channel for women over 50. Today I thought we would have a little bit of fun and take a trip back in time. We'll talk about some things that were normal in the 70s and 80s that would really surprise people nowadays, or that do when they hear about it. Of course, it's not really hard to surprise this new generation. Not really hard to freak them out. They're kind of freaked out by everything. So, what are some things that happened in the 70s and 80s that were just normal for us when we lived there? One of the first things is smoking everywhere. People smoked in offices, restaurants, hospitals, airplanes. There was always a smoking section in a restaurant and a non-smoking section in a restaurant, and airplanes too, but the smoke kind of wafted everywhere, so you really couldn't get away from the smoke. And I remember smoking on the airplane. The back rows were reserved for smoking. Of course, the back row at first class was reserved for smoking too, and that smoke always blew back into the economy class, so you had an airplane filled with smoke. And smoking in hospitals was a thing. It was crazy. Schools had smoking areas. I remember our high school had I think it was a smoking tree that we had. I didn't ever go there. And some schools had indoor smoking lounges. Ours was outside, but teachers would routinely bum cigarettes from students. And then you could buy cigarettes really easily. One way you could buy them was from a vending machine. You just put your money in and pull the cigarettes out. Or you could get them from the store. If you were really young, you could buy them with a note from your parents. But as teenagers, we just went to the store and bought them. It wasn't difficult. They didn't card anybody for cigarettes in those days. So that definitely was a thing. So travel and car safety, no seat belts. There were seat belts, but we didn't always use them. Kids bounced around in the back seat or laid down in the back of station wagons while the car was moving. My friend's family had a station wagon, and we would all be piled in the back, and her mother used to hold these crash drills. She would yell, "Crash!" and we'd all have to put our heads down and put our arms over our head and get in the crash position. I doubt that we would have much of a warning if we were going to get in a crash, but she did those all the time. It was kind of funny. And then as kids, we had a van that we used to travel in, and as soon as we got out of town, my parents would let us take off our seatbelts and go in the back and play in the back of the van. So completely normal. Also, truck bed rides. We used to ride in the open bed of a pickup truck, and we wouldn't be sitting down in the bed. We'd be sitting up on the wheel well, or we'd actually be sitting up on the edge of the truck bed, just barely hanging on. So that was absolutely common. Apparently totally legal at the time. Nobody cared. The last thing I have on travel is guns on airplanes. Passengers could check rifles or even bring certain long guns into the cabin with minimal security. So, glad we don't have that anymore. Free-range children were sent outside in the morning and told not to come back until the street lights turned on. We didn't have any supervision. Many of us were actually physically locked out of the house and couldn't go back in until the street lights came on. I have heard about latchkey kids, but I don't remember having a key, especially when I was in elementary school, because I remember one incident very clearly. I got home and I was the only one there, so I don't know where my siblings were. I don't know where my parents were. And I was locked out of the house. The house was locked. Nobody was home, and I didn't have a key. I was really, really skinny at the time. And so the way I gained entry into my house was I crawled through the dog door and went in. Our dog door went into the garage. And then I remember going up the stairs. I'm like, oh, please be unlocked. Because the door to the kitchen from the garage sometimes was locked and sometimes was not. And I think I was able to get into the house. But I do remember being locked out of the house. And I remember being locked out on more than one occasion. So I don't think my parents cared if I got home and I was locked out. They're like, just wait in the yard. We'll be home when we get home. Hitchhiking, adults and teenagers frequently caught rides with total strangers as a normal way to commute or travel. I never did this, but I remember my father had to one time. We broke down out in the middle of nowhere. And, this was way before cell phones or anything. We had no way to communicate. So my parents decided that my mom would stay with us and my dad would hitchhike into the nearest town and get us help. So fortunately, some friendly people picked him up and he was able to go in town and bring a tow truck to us. So and then the playgrounds, and you guys have probably seen a lot of this online and remember we had tall, unpadded steel jungle gyms. The base for these playgrounds was usually asphalt. Sometimes it was dirt, sometimes it was rocks. We had metal slides that would just cook in the sun, so when you slid down them, you'd get to the bottom and your backside was all burned. Your butt and the back of your legs would be burned from the slides. And the horrible merry-go-rounds, oh my gosh, those things were so rusty. And unless you were in the very center of that thing, because that was the best place to be, some bigger kid would always come along and spin you so fast that you just flew off that thing. And like I said, right into the asphalt you'd go. I remember when I was in elementary school, I remember falling off of the bars. There were these bars and the girls would get up on them and you kind of put one leg over them and do flips. And at some point during this, I fell off of the bar and landed on my back. I don't know if I hit my head or not, but I remember laying there on the ground. And when I opened my eyes, everybody was just kind of standing around me in a circle looking down. And I had to tell them, I'm like, y'all, maybe somebody should go get a teacher. So somebody went and got the teacher, but teacher would pick you up and dust you off and take you right back into class. There were no emergency rooms back then. We're going to circle back to that in a minute. So parents, usually specifically mothers, would give the kids a check that she'd sign and send them out to go do grocery shopping or go buy something that they needed for school, go buy shoes or clothes or something. So that was common too. And then remember going to a gas station, y'all? And when I was younger in the 70s, they had self-service gas stations. My father would always fill up the car himself, but my mother would always go to the full service station. So the guy from the station would come out and fill the gas tank, check the oil, clean the windshield. So that was crazy. I think now the only place that's common is in New Jersey. I think it's the law that you can't pump your own gas, or it was, I don't know, 10 years ago, last time I checked. So gas was always also super cheap. I remember when I was a teenager, a group of us would get together and decide we were going to go cruising, and we'd go into the gas station and we'd all empty the change out of our pockets onto the counters. We'd throw our change there and we'd say, we want this much gas. And that was enough gas to cruise all night on, just the change out of our pockets. So that was crazy. Layaway was also a big thing before everybody had credit cards, and women couldn't get credit cards in the 70s without a man to sign for them. So layaway was an option. You brought your purchase to the counter. They took a deposit and they wrapped it and then put your information on it, put it on a shelf, and then you continued to make payments as you could afford them. And then as soon as you paid the item off, you could take your items home. So I remember doing that, and I remember the store that I worked in, people would put stuff on layaway all the time. So very common thing in the 70s and the 80s. And encyclopedias, we didn't have Google. We had encyclopedias. So you would get the full set of Encyclopedia Britannica or the World Book. We actually had both. I always liked the World Book ones a little bit better. They were newer and they had little gold on the edge of the pages, and they had their own shelf where they were displayed in the living room. And that was how we did all our school assignments. We needed to write an essay on something, so we would pull that encyclopedia out and basically copy, write down everything that the encyclopedia said. We wouldn't even change it up. We'd just turn in the encyclopedia's work. So I remember whole milk as the only beverage choice in the school cafeteria. I guess there are other options now. I don't know. I don't have kids. But, if you ate in the school cafeteria, especially in elementary school, you got milk as your beverage. And I think you could choose between regular milk and chocolate milk. But that was it. That was the only option there was. And then I remember being really little and having to take the milk up to the school janitor, who was always standing by the trash cans where you threw away your all the stuff that was left over. We'd have to take our milk to the custodian to have him open it because we could never get our milk open. And then on Saturday, while we waited for cartoons to stop, we would look through the Sears catalog toy section. Man, right before Christmas, this huge Sears catalog would come out every year, and everybody had one. And the kids would look through this every day, and we'd flip through the toy section, and we'd circle the stuff we wanted. And that was how we knew what we wanted for Christmas. That, and, we'd see all the commercials for the toys during our cartoons, but that Sears catalog was a big deal, and we loved it. We loved to go through it. And then when you did watch TV, there were only 3 channels. There were maybe 4 if you had the UHF channel, if you were lucky. And then you had to adjust the antenna. Every time you changed the channel, you would have to adjust the antenna so that channel would come in. Sometimes you'd have to go get some aluminum foil and put that on the antennas. We had the rabbit ear antennas for the regular channels, and then we had this circular antenna for the UHF channels. I don't know what the difference between those two things was, but it had both of them. And then you needed a TV guide because there was no guide on the TV. You had to flip through the TV guide to see what was on, or you could flip through your 3 channels, but you had to get up and walk over to the TV to do it, and it was always the kids' job to change the channels on the TV. And then y'all remember at midnight the Star Spangled Banner would be played, and then there was just snow on the TV until the morning news. So between midnight and like 6:30, there was no TV, nothing available. And this was way before the days of cable. We never got cable even when it was available. But that was a thing. So music, again, in the 70s, music was, and even in the early 80s, music was really, really hard to come by, especially when everything was still in records. So if a song came out that you wanted, I remember you had to go to the record store, and often we would just walk to the record store. We'd get our siblings or our friends together, and we would walk to the record store. And, it was always a long walk. It usually took about a half an hour to get there or so. And then when you get there, of course, the record that you wanted, the record with the song on it that you wanted. It was usually only one song. If you were lucky enough and they had that record in, you could buy the record, and you'd have to buy an entire record just to get one song. It kind of sucked. But 9 times out of 10, they did not have the record you were looking for because it's so popular. It sold out the first day. So then you had to decide, all right, do I make the half-hour trek home empty-handed, or do I get a record that I didn't really want? So those were the choices back then. Now, when cassette tapes came out in the 80s, it was a lot easier to find the music that you wanted. And I remember going to the store and looking at all the stuff, and there was a little round window and a guy behind the window in the back, and you would have to go up and tell him what cassette you wanted, and he would go pull it and pass it to you through that little round window. I don't know if you guys remember that. But just crazy stuff. Or either that, or you could record your music off the radio, but you'd have to sit there all day and wait for your song to be played, and then without fail, every single time, the DJ would talk over half of the beginning of the song, and so it sucked. It was just so hard to do music back then. So we mostly kind of just listened to the radio. And then telephones, landline only, dial phones. We never had push-button phones even after they came out. We always had a dial phone. And the family only had 2 phones. One was in the kitchen and one was in our parents' room. So there was no privacy when you were on the phone. You were trying to talk to somebody. When you called somebody, they never answered the phone. Usually their parents answered the phone, and you had to talk to their parents for a while before they would come to the phone. And, if you were trying to get a hold of somebody and they didn't answer the phone, again, there was no way to leave a message. You just said, well, I'll try to call him back later. And then if you didn't want to be bothered, you took the phone off the hook, and it would make that horrible beeping noise for a while, and then it would stop. But then when the phone rang, everyone would try to be the one to answer it. Even, you never knew who was calling. That was part of the excitement. So the phone rang, and all 3 of us kids would yell, I got it. And, there was a race to answer the phone every time. And no long distance calls until after 7 p.m. Of course, the only long distance calls you were ever involved in as a kid were to your grandparents. But I remember we couldn't make a long distance call until after 7 p.m. or on the weekends when it was cheaper. So lots of road trips. I mentioned the van. We went on a lot of road trips, and there was nothing to entertain you on a road trip other than games that you invented to occupy yourself. I mean, you could bring a book, but you'd get tired of reading after a while. But we played games that we made up to occupy ourselves, counting different color cars or trying to find your name from the letter on billboards, things like that. We would do to keep ourselves occupied. And my dad would always go to AAA to get maps and triptychs, because there was no Google navigation. You had to navigate by maps, and getting lost was really common back in those days. And if you did get lost, then you had to find a phone booth and hope the person or the place you were trying to get to was going to answer their phone, so you could get directions to go there. So kind of crazy, total lawlessness. We were just out there winging it. And absolutely no political correctness. We were equal opportunity offenders. I remember my sister and I used to tell dead baby jokes at the dinner table. My father would get so mad at us. But, really, really off-color stuff. And people just didn't get offended back then. And if they did, they kept it to themselves. So, but like I said, as a kid, we walked everywhere. We walked to school. There was nobody there to pick you up. If we took the bus, we walked home from the bus stop. There's nobody to pick us up from the bus stop. Drives me crazy when I see that nowadays. And we would often go, especially as younger kids. We always went to 7-Eleven was our corner store / gas station. So we would always go to 7-Eleven for candy in the early days, and then cigarettes as we got a little bit older, but we'd always walk there. I remember one time we snuck out of the house at like 3 a.m. It was really stupid. And we walked to 7-Eleven at 3 a.m. as teenagers to get cigarettes, and we came home and we were trying to sneak in, and I remember coming in the front door and closing the front door as quietly as I could, and I turned around and there was my mother standing there. I was like, uh-oh, we got caught. So we did a lot of stupid shit back then. Most of us survived, some of us didn't, but you know. And then injuries, boy, if you got hurt at school, if you got hurt at home, there were no trips to the ER. You might get a Band-Aid and be told to shake it off. And don't even think about walking inside if you were bleeding. Boy, you better stay outside, because I remember my mom screaming, "Don't bleed on the carpet." So we'd be outside bleeding, banging on the door, "I need a Band-Aid." And your mom would come out and wrap a Band-Aid around you, tell you to shake it off, you'd be all right. I remember one time I closed my thumb in the car door, and I remember that you could see the bone in there. And my father lifted me up and set me on the counter and looked at it, and they wrapped a bandage around that thing and sent me on my way. I guess it healed okay. And the last thing that I want to mention about growing up in the 70s and the 80s, getting a package. Oh my gosh, that was such a rare luxury when the UPS man pulled up to your house. I remember when I was a kid, I'd be having my birthday party and we'd be outside running through the sprinklers or whatever we were doing in the yard for my birthday. And I don't know how my aunt and uncle planned this, but when they sent me my birthday gift, the UPS man would always arrive right in the middle of my party. And like I said, this was such a huge deal. Oh my gosh, we would all the kids at the party would run out to the UPS truck and we'd get the package, and then we'd get to open it, and it was so exciting. And then I remember before Christmas, I would go with my mom you'd go to the UPS, you'd go to the UPS place. It wasn't a store, it was a warehouse. And they had an office in the front of the warehouse, and you'd get in line because everybody was there sending their packages for Christmas, and wait to get those gifts sent off to Grandma and Grandpa. But those are the only 2 times I ever remember dealing with packages or getting packages. It was such a rare thing. So those are the memories that I have for the day. So let's move on to our Badass Woman of the Week. The Badass Woman this week is Alice Ball. Alice Ball earned undergraduate degrees in pharmaceutical chemistry in 1912 and pharmacy in 1914 from the University of Washington. She then transferred to the College of Hawaii, now known as the University of Hawaii, and became the very first African American and the very first woman to graduate with an MS degree in chemistry in 1915. She was offered a teaching and research position there and became the institution's very first woman chemistry instructor. She was only 23 years old. As a laboratory researcher, Ball worked extensively to develop a successful treatment for those suffering from Hansen's disease, otherwise known as leprosy. Her research led her to create the first injectable leprosy treatment using oil from the, I'm going to mispronounce this, chalmugra tree, which up until then was only a moderately successful topical agent that was used in Chinese and Indian medicine. Ball successfully isolated the oil into fatty acid components of different molecular weights, allowing her to manipulate the oil into a water-soluble injectable form. Ball's scientific rigor resulted in a highly successful method to alleviate leprosy symptoms, later known as the Ball method, that was used on thousands of infected individuals for over 30 years until sulfone drugs were introduced. The Ball method was so successful, leprosy patients were discharged from hospitals and facilities across the globe, including from Kalapapa, an isolation facility on the north shore of Molokai, Hawaii, where thousands of people suffering from leprosy died in years prior. Thanks to Alice Ball, these banished individuals could now return to their families free from the symptoms of leprosy. Tragically, Ball died on December 31st, 1916, at the young age of 24 after complications resulting from inhaling chlorine gas in a lab teaching accident. During her brief lifetime, she did not get to see the full impact of her discovery. What's more, following her death, the president of the College of Hawaii, Dr. Arthur Dean, continued Ball's research without giving her credit for the discovery. Dean even claimed her discovery for himself, calling it the Dean method. So that is all the information I have for you today. What are your memories from the 70s and 80s that you think would really surprise people these days? Drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about them. Also, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any future uploads. I post new video every single week. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you next time, everybody.